Calvin Mercer had worked at Hawthorne Components for 34 years, and in all that time, nobody had ever called him upstairs to hand him $50,000. Richard Hale pushed the agreement across the conference table. Read the number again. Calvin already had $50,000. A performance bonus. Hawthorne had spent most of the year converting 2 aging production lines, and Calvin's maintenance crew had finished the project 6 weeks ahead of schedule. Richard tapped the paper. You earned it. Calvin didn't touch it. His attention had moved to the folder beside Richard's elbow. Everybody in the plant knew cuts were coming. Nobody knew the names. How many? Calvin asked. Richard's expression changed. 47. Friday. Final finance approval is Friday afternoon. Termination packets go out after that. Calvin leaned back. 3 days. 47 people. Richard nodded toward the bonus. I know the timing is bad, but this is separate. Calvin looked at him. No, it ain't. Don't make yourself responsible for everybody in this building. I didn't. Calvin nodded toward the folder. Let me see it. I can't show you confidential restructuring documents. Then keep the 50 grand. Richard stared at him. Calvin pushed the agreement back. I'm serious. Calvin, your bonus has nothing to do with headcount. Then the list shouldn't change whether I earned it. Richard studied him. Finally, he opened the folder. He didn't hand it over. He turned it around. Calvin read, dotted. Shipping, assembly, maintenance, quality. Names he'd known for 20 years. Names he'd barely known for 2. He noticed something else. 2 management roles listed for next year's expansion were marked. Planned, unfilled. Calvin frowned. You're laying off people now while budgeting supervisors you haven't even hired? Richard sighed. Expansion planning and current headcount are different budgets. Sounds convenient. It's how corporate approved the restructuring. Calvin kept reading. Then his fingers stopped. Denise Walker. Richard saw his face. What a... Calvin pointed. Take her off. Richard looked down. Then back at him. Denise Walker? Yeah. Of all 47 names. Calvin nodded. Her. Richard almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because he couldn't believe what he'd heard. Calvin, Denise Walker almost got you fired. Calvin kept looking at the name. I know. By lunch, Marcus Reed knew something had happened. You get the bonus? Calvin kept working. Marcus waited. How much? 50. Marcus grinned. 50,000? Calvin looked at him. Marcus stopped smiling. 50,000. Calvin went back to the machine. Marcus slapped his glove against Calvin's shoulder. Man, you better buy lunch until retirement. I turned it down. Marcus stared at him. You what? Calvin stood. Denise is on the layoff list. Marcus looked at him like Calvin had just announced he was moving to Mars. Denise Walker? Yeah. And somehow that cost you 50 grand. I told Hale I'd talk about the bonus when her name came off. Marcus lowered his voice. After what she did to you. Calvin's jaw tightened. You don't know what she did. I know you almost lost your job. You know what people said. Marcus had known Calvin 17 years. He knew the story everybody knew. 8 years earlier, Denise Walker had reported Calvin over a safety violation. An investigation followed. Calvin came within days of being terminated. He survived. But the story inside Hawthorne became simple. Denise tried to bury him. Marcus shook his head. You're risking $50,000 for the woman who wrote you up. Calvin picked up his wrench. Marcus took it from him. Nope, we're finishing this. Give me that. Not until you explain. Calvin held out his hand. Marcus sighed and gave it back. You got 4 years left on that mortgage. Thank you for remembering. I'm serious. So am I. Marcus watched him for a moment, then said, "You know what Denise does to her own numbers, right?" Calvin looked up. "What?" "She'll stop a whole cell over something everybody else would inspect at the end of the run. She's been doing it all year. So her output stinks because she treats every bad bolt like somebody pulled a fire alarm." Calvin shrugged. "Maybe that's why parts from her line don't come back." Marcus rolled his eyes. "That's not going to save her in a restructuring." Calvin didn't answer. Not then. He found Denise near the end of second shift. She was reviewing a production sheet. "Don't," she said. Calvin stopped. "Don't what?" "Whatever you're doing upstairs." He didn't respond. She looked at him. "You think people don't talk?" "I didn't tell anybody." "Marcus did." "Marcus talks. So do executives when somebody refuses $50,000. Calvin glanced around. "You heard that. Half the building will hear it by tomorrow." He lowered his voice. "You're on the list." "I figured." "You figured?" "I've been here 29 years, Calvin. I'm expensive. I'm almost 60, and I stop lines when management wants numbers." She lifted the production sheet. "You don't need an MBA to see where that leads." "I'm trying to stop it." "Why?" Calvin hesitated. That was enough. Denise's expression hardened. "If this is about 8 years ago, you're 8 years late." "It isn't only that." "Good." She handed him the sheet. "Then leave me alone." "Denise, Tartaris. If they cut me, they cut me. You're close to retirement. Don't start talking to me like I'm some old woman you're rescuing." "I didn't say that. You offered $50,000 to get my name removed. I used the only leverage I had." "No." She stepped closer. "You used the leverage that let you feel noble." Calvin didn't answer. Denise walked past him, then stopped. "Whatever you're trying to buy back, Calvin, 50 grand isn't enough." She left. Calvin stood there a moment, then went looking for the file he'd spent 8 years avoiding. Calvin didn't need hours to find it. The investigation folder had been sitting in the same box in his garage since the week he brought it home. Safety interlock bypass, line 4. Marcus found him reading it before first shift the next morning. "What is that?" "Old business." Marcus pulled over a chair. He read the first pages, then stopped. "Wait. Duh." Calvin knew what he'd found. Marcus pointed. "It says Denise reported the bypass." "Yeah. She actually did report you." "Yeah. So everybody was right." "No." Marcus tapped the paragraph. "Was the interlock disabled?" Calvin closed the folder. "Yes." "By who?" "An I." Marcus stared. "You actually bypassed it?" "For 12 minutes. 12 minutes too long." "I know." "Why?" Calvin looked at the report. Line 4 had been failing for months. A safety sensor kept tripping. Maintenance requested replacement after replacement. Production kept delaying it. Then a major order fell behind. Calvin convinced himself he could run the line manually for a few minutes until the next shutdown window. He knew better. He did it anyway. Denise walked onto the line, saw the bypass, stopped production, and reported him. Marcus sat back. "So what am I missing?" Calvin turned to page 7. A handwritten notation sat near the bottom. "Prior maintenance warnings verified separately." Calvin reached into the box. 7 maintenance requests. April, May, June, Sawyer. Same failing component. Same warning. Same request for replacement. Marcus read them. They knew. I'd told them. 7 times. 7 I kept, and they didn't replace it until after? Yeah. Marcus looked back at the report. Who wrote this note? Calvin recognized the initials. Evelyn Shaw. And suddenly the parts he had spent 8 years separating from each other started coming back together. Evelyn Shaw had retired 18 months earlier. When Calvin called, She remembered the incident before he finished explaining. You finally opened that file? Calvin looked at the phone. How'd you know? Because if you remembered it properly, you would have called years ago. They met that afternoon. Calvin put the investigation summary on the table. Evelyn barely looked at it. You want me to tell you Denise didn't report you? No. Good, because she did. I know. You want me to tell you the bypass wasn't dangerous? No. Bye. Good again. Calvin pointed at the handwritten notation. What's this? Evelyn looked at the page. My handwriting. What does verified separately mean? She leaned back. The original recommendation was termination. Calvin nodded. He remembered that much. Deliberate safety bypass, production exposure, gross misconduct. I know. What you apparently forgot is that Denise fought the recommendation. Calvin looked up. Evelyn continued. She wasn't defending what you did. She was furious with you. Sounds like her. She said firing you and closing the file would let management pretend the problem began with one mechanic making one bad decision. Evelyn tapped Calvin's maintenance requests. She made sure we found these. Denise? She pulled 6 months of work order history herself. Calvin stared at the papers. She insisted the investigation include every warning you'd filed before the bypass. He said nothing. Evelyn looked at him. Without her, you would have been a reckless mechanic who disabled a perfectly good safety system. But I did disable it. Yes? Then she wasn't wrong to report me. No. Evelyn leaned forward. That's the part you never liked. Calvin looked away. She didn't save you from something you didn't do. Then Evelyn tapped the stack of maintenance warnings. She stopped them from pretending you did it alone. Calvin sat quietly. That was the truth. Not the version people at Hawthorne told. Not the version Calvin told himself. Denise reported a real violation. Then she stopped the company from using Calvin as the only person responsible for a failure management had ignored for months. Calvin looked at Evelyn. People hated her after. I remember. They thought she tried to get me fired. Yes. She never corrected them. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. You really want me to answer why? Calvin didn't. Because he already knew. Evelyn pushed the folder toward him. If you're gonna help Denise now, don't turn yourself into the victim first. Calvin stood. I'm not. Good. She nodded toward the paperwork. Then remember the rest. And he did. After the investigation 8 years earlier, Calvin had returned to work with a final warning. Management received its own internal findings for failing to respond to the maintenance requests. But that wasn't the story that spread through Hawthorne. The story was, Denise reported Calvin. Calvin almost got fired. Therefore, Denise tried to destroy him. The men on his crew stopped talking when she entered the break room. Someone called her a company rat. Someone left a plastic snake on her desk. Calvin saw it. Denise came to him. You need to tell them. My son's out of work. She stared at him. What does that have to do with anything? I'm paying his rent, groceries, helping with the kids. I know. If those guys hear I knowingly bypassed the safety. You did knowingly bypass it. Calvin lowered his voice. I could lose every bit of trust I've got. Denise looked at him. So I lose mine instead. I didn't ask them to blame you. No. She paused. You're just letting them. Calvin remembered exactly what he said next. Give it a little time. Denise's face changed. How much? I don't know. Calvin, please. She walked away. A little time became 8 years. Now Denise stood across from him in almost the same hallway. You remembered? Calvin nodded. All of it. Enough. No, all of it. He looked at her. Yes. She waited. Calvin said, I should have corrected them. Yes. I didn't. No. He looked down. Denise's voice softened, but only slightly. You were scared. That's not an excuse. No. Calvin almost smiled. Now you're agreeing with me. Don't get used to it. That tiny break in the tension lasted 1 second. Then Denise said, "You know what bothers me about the 50,000? Calvin waited. You're trying to sacrifice something you can afford to lose. 50,000 isn't exactly nothing. You know what I mean." He did. Denise looked straight at him. "Money isn't what you're scared of." Calvin said nothing. "Your name is." That landed. 34 years at Hawthorne. Calvin Mercer meant something there. Reliable. Skilled. The guy management trusted. The guy younger technicians called before engineering. That was the thing he had protected 8 years ago. Not his paycheck. His reputation. Denise saw the answer on his face. "There." Calvin breathed out. "So what do you want me to do?" "Nothing. You're about to lose your job. Maybe I can help." "Then help because I belong here, not because you feel guilty." That changed something. Calvin looked at the production sheet in her hand. He remembered Marcus complaining that Denise stopped lines over anything. He remembered Denise saying it herself. "I stop lines when management wants numbers." Calvin held out his hand. "Give me that." She frowned. "The production sheet." "Why?" "Because I'm done trying to buy your job." Denise handed it to him. Calvin turned and walked away. He found Marcus. Pulled Denise's last 12 months. Marcus stared at him. "Output." "Output. Scrap. Returns. Rework. Customer complaints. What are we looking for?" Calvin glanced at the sheet. "Whether she's as slow as everybody says." Marcus frowned. "That doesn't sound helpful." Calvin said, "Depends why she's slow." At first, Denise's numbers looked bad. Marcus pointed at the report. "Bottom 3 in units per shift. Keep going. Higher labor cost. Keep going. More inspection downtime than every other supervisor." Marcus looked at Calvin. "I told you, she stops everything." Calvin took another report, then stopped. "What?" He pointed to the defect column. Lowest return rate in the department. They check scrap. Low. Rework. Lowest. Customer complaints tied to her cell. Almost none. Marcus leaned closer. "She didn't just slow production. No. She slowed bad production." 3 months earlier, Denise had doubled inspection frequency on one product family. Output dropped. So did warranty claims. Then Calvin found the report on 8,000 units Denise had refused to release. Marcus read it. She shut down half a shift for this. Fastener tolerance. They wanted her to ship it. She refused. What happened? Engineering checked it the next morning. Marcus read the final note. Defective. Calvin nodded. If those shipped, they'd come back, or fail in the field. Marcus sat back. For the first time, he didn't call Denise slow. They brought everything to Richard. He read quietly. Finally. This is a good argument. Calvin waited. Bah. Richard nodded. But restructuring isn't based on one report. Her numbers are wrong. No, her output numbers are accurate. They're incomplete. That I agree with. Calvin pointed at the defect data. Then take her off. Richard shook his head. Her personnel history is still part of the review. Calvin knew what he meant. The safety incident. That history isn't what you think. I've read the summary. You've read part of it. Richard leaned back. If you're asking me to reopen an 8-year-old investigation, then we reopen the whole thing. Calvin was quiet. Richard continued. That includes you. Marcus stepped forward. That incident is 8 years old. Richard looked at him, which is exactly why I'm not interested in selectively rewriting it now. Then he looked at Calvin. If Denise's record is being misunderstood because of that incident, bring me the complete record Friday morning. Calvin nodded. And understand something. Richard pointed toward the bonus paperwork. Your leadership record was part of the performance award recommendation. I don't know whether reopening this changes anything, but I'm not promising it doesn't. Marcus looked at Calvin. Richard added, and even if everything you say is true, keeping Denise still leaves us short of the required savings. Calvin thought about the restructuring sheet. 2 future supervisor roles. Unfilled. Already budgeted. You've still got those expansion positions. Richard's expression tightened. Finance already rejected cutting them. Because we need the management capacity next year. If Denise goes, you need quality capacity today. Richard closed the folder. Bring me the evidence Friday. That isn't an answer. No. Richard looked at him. And neither is eliminating a future position without finance rerunning the plan. Calvin nodded. Then, rerun it. Friday. Outside the office, Marcus grabbed Calvin's arm. You don't have to put your whole reputation on the table. Calvin looked at him. If I tell them Denise's record is misleading and leave out what I did, I'm doing the same thing again. Marcus had no answer. Later that afternoon, Denise found Calvin. I heard you're reopening it. Marcus? Marcus, do you want? Calvin nodded. Don't. I have to. No, you don't. Calvin looked at her, then shook his head. You were right. About what? The thing I was afraid to lose. Denise understood immediately. Calvin held up the 3 folders. Maintenance requests. Investigation. Current quality records. I can't change what I did 8 years ago. No, Ty. But I can stop doing it. Denise stared at him, then quietly said, You better have your facts straight. Calvin almost smiled. I figured you'd say that. Friday morning, Calvin carried 3 folders upstairs. No secret recording. No surprise witness. No miracle. Just paperwork that had existed for years, and a truth he'd avoided longer. Richard had 2 finance managers on the call, and an HR representative beside him. Start wherever you need to, Richard said. Calvin began with the maintenance requests. 8 years ago, Line 4 had a failing safety sensor. I reported it 7 times. He laid out the dates. The replacement didn't happen. Then he opened the investigation report. When the line kept tripping during a major production run, I bypassed the interlock. The room became quiet. I knew I wasn't supposed to. Richard watched him. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I could watch it manually. Calvin shook his head. That's just a smarter way of saying I knew better and did it anyway. He explained how Denise found the bypass, how she stopped the line, how she reported him. Then he laid down the old maintenance records. She also forced the investigation to include these. One finance manager began reading. Calvin continued. The reason most people at Hawthorne think Denise tried to get me fired is because after I came back, I let them think that. Richard looked up. You never corrected it? No. Why? My son had just lost his job. I was helping his family. My crew trusted me. I was afraid of what admitting the full story would do to my reputation. Richard said. So Denise carried it. Calvin didn't soften the answer. Yes. The HR representative stopped writing for a moment. Calvin opened the 3rd folder. These are Denise's current numbers. Richard held up a hand. Before you move on, you understand you've just put your own safety violation and your handling of the aftermath on record. Yes. And you're doing that because you feel guilty. Calvin shook his head. No, too. Richard raised an eyebrow. I feel guilty because I should. He pushed Denise's quality records forward. But guilt isn't why you should keep her. He explained the defect rate, the reduced rework, the warranty claims, the rejected 8,000 unit batch. One finance manager asked, What would those returns have cost? The conversation changed. For 15 minutes, Calvin barely spoke. Finance compared scrap, warranty exposure, rework, output. Then Richard looked at him. So which is it? What? Is Denise valuable, or do you owe her? Both. Richard waited. Calvin pointed at the reports. But you shouldn't keep her because I owe her. He tapped the rejected batch report. Keep her because you're cutting the person who kept bad parts from leaving this building. Richard looked at the finance team. One of them said, if we retain Walker, the savings target still misses. Calvin nodded toward the restructuring sheet. Then remove one of the unfilled expansion supervisor roles. Richard had expected that. We discussed this. Yeah, we need that position next year. And Denise exists this year. The finance manager opened the expansion budget. Richard said, if we eliminate it now, we're creating a management gap when volume increases. Calvin replied, if you eliminate Denise now, you're creating a quality gap before the volume even gets here. Nobody spoke. Calvin added, I'm not asking you to put somebody else's name where hers is. That mattered. Richard looked at the numbers again. Finally, we'll rerun the head count. Calvin didn't move. Richard looked at him. That isn't a yes. I know. It could still come back no. I know. Finance signs the final plan this afternoon. I know. Richard almost smiled. You planning on saying anything besides, I know? Calvin thought. No. One of the finance managers laughed. The tension finally cracked. At 4:37 that afternoon, Marcus found Calvin near line 2. He didn't say anything. He held up the revised staffing sheet. Calvin took it. 46 names. The planned expansion position was gone. Denise Walker wasn't. Calvin found her clearing papers from her desk. He put the revised sheet down. Denise looked at it, then looked again. Her name wasn't there. What happened? They cut one of next year's unfilled positions. She looked at Calvin. You told them everything? Yes. All of it. Yes. Denise closed her eyes briefly. Idiot. Tut. Probably. What about the bonus? Calvin shrugged. Don't know. An hour later, Richard called him upstairs. The same agreement waited on the table. The performance bonus stands. Calvin looked at it. Richard continued. You earned it for the conversion project. What you disclose changes how I understand an old incident. It doesn't erase what you accomplished this year. Calvin didn't reach for the pen. Then a voice came from the doorway. Take the damn money, Calvin. Denise Dietolmaos. Calvin turned. She folded her arms. You finally told the truth. Don't make me suffer through you becoming stupid too. Richard laughed. Calvin looked at the agreement. Then, at Denise. You sure? No. Burn it in the parking lot. Calvin picked up the pen. The layoffs still happened. 46 people still received envelopes nobody wanted. Saving Denise didn't make that disappear. Calvin knew that. So did she. Before the end of shift, Marcus approached Denise. I owe you an apology. She looked at him. I believed what everybody said. Denise glanced toward Calvin. You believed what Calvin let you believe. Calvin heard her. He didn't defend himself. Friday evening, the factory whistle sounded. Calvin closed his toolbox and picked up the old metal lunchbox he'd carried for almost 20 years. Denise was near the exit. They walked outside together. 8 years earlier, Calvin had left that building carrying his reputation. Denise had carried part of his blame. Neither of them could get those years back. But the truth was finally where it belonged. Denise glanced at him. You ever gonna tell me why you offered 50 grand before you just told the truth? Calvin looked at her. Because telling the truth was harder. Denise nodded. Yeah. They kept walking. I noticed. And this time, Calvin didn't have anything left to hide. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who'd understand why that choice mattered. And follow Curves and Crowns Stories for more.